The wind howled like a wounded beast, tearing through the dense pine forest as snow fell in blinding sheets. It was the kind of cold that stole breath, that gnawed at bone and soul alike. Beneath the weight of the storm, a lone figure moved, slow, unsteady, yet determined. The bear was dying. His fur, once thick and golden, clung to his massive frame in frozen clumps, ice weighing down his limbs. Hunger had hollowed him out, turning muscle into trembling weakness. His breath came in ragged puffs, vanishing into the blackness of the night. With every step, his paws sank deeper into the snow, his body screaming for rest. But he could not stop. To stop was to die. Then light. Through the swirling storm, a faint glow flickered in the distance, warm and golden against the endless white. A cabin. Smoke curled from its chimney, the scent of burning wood cutting through the bitter air. Instinct told him to stay away, to avoid the world of men. But starvation silenced fear. He was too weak to hunt, too exhausted to run. A deep, rumbling sound escaped his throat, not a growl of warning, but a plea. Inside the cabin, Lena Vorskaya stiffened. She had lived alone in these woods long enough to know the sounds of the wild. Wolves cried to the moon, owls called in the night. But this was different. A low, mournful sound that carried through the wind, heavy with something almost human, pain, desperation. She set her book aside, rising from the worn armchair by the fire. Wrapping her thick woolen shawl around her shoulders, she moved toward the frost-lined window and froze. Just beyond her porch, half hidden by swirling snow, stood a bear. Even in the dim lantern light, she could see he was enormous, easily 7 feet tall if he stood on his hind legs. But there was no menace in his stance. His head hung low, his breaths labored, clouds of mist rising from his nostrils. The storm had beaten him down, turned him into something frail, something pleading. Fear and logic screamed at her to step back, to lock the door and wait for him to move on. A wild bear was a wild bear, no matter how pitiful it looked. But something held her in place. It was his eyes, dark, hollow, sunken from hunger, yet there was something else beneath them. Not the wild gleam of a predator, but the dull resignation of a creature on the edge of death. Lena's fingers curled around the doorknob. She hesitated. This was madness. And then the bear did something that stopped her breath. He dropped. Not onto his side in a collapse, not into an aggressive stance, but onto his stomach, paws tucked beneath him in a gesture almost submissive. He was surrendering. Not to her, but to fate. To the cold. To whatever would come next. Lena swallowed hard. Slowly, she turned, moving to the kitchen. Her hands worked quickly, grabbing a bowl, pouring steaming broth into it. The scent of fish and warmth filled the air. She wrapped herself in a thick coat, boots crunching against the wooden floor as she stepped toward the door. The wind hit her like a living thing, biting at her skin. She took careful steps forward, setting the bowl down in the snow, just out of reach. Then she backed away. The bear didn't move at first. His dark eyes flickered from her to the bowl, suspicion battling need. Then, inch by inch, he dragged himself forward. His nose hovered over the offering, steam curling around his muzzle. And then he ate. Lena exhaled, a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The bear didn't snarl or lunge. He simply ate, slow and careful, as if afraid the moment would be stolen from him. For the first time in years, Lena felt something stir in her chest. Pity. Or perhaps something more. Something she would soon learn could change the course of both their lives forever. The storm raged on through the night, battering the cabin with fists of wind and ice, but Lena barely noticed. She stood by the window, fingers curled around a chipped mug of tea, watching the bear. He had finished the broth, every last drop, but had not moved from his spot in the snow. He lay curled in on himself, his massive body rising and falling with slow, labored breaths. Ice still clung to his fur, but the steam from the soup had melted a few small patches near his muzzle. He didn't seem dangerous now, just tired. Lena tightened her grip on the mug. What have I done? This was insanity. Everyone in the village knew better than to feed a wild bear. She had seen what hunger could do to them. Stories of cabins torn apart, of people who had been too close when the beast snapped. Bears did not understand kindness. They understood hunger, instinct, survival. And yet, something about him unsettled her. Not in fear, but in the way he did not act like the others she had seen in the wild. There was no aggression, no desperate lunging. He had taken the food with slow, deliberate movements. As if he knew, as if he understood, Lena exhaled, running a hand through her thick brown hair. Don't be stupid. He's just a bear, But even as she told herself that, she couldn't bring herself to step away from the window. By morning, the storm had passed. Lena awoke to the pale light of dawn filtering through the frost-covered glass. She sat up, stretching the stiffness from her limbs, then paused. The house was eerily silent. For a brief moment, she wondered if she had dreamt it all, the storm, the bear, the strange moment of connection. But as she stepped toward the window, her breath caught. He was still there. Snow had piled around him, half burying his massive form. His body was still, too still. Lena's heart lurched. Was he dead? Without thinking, she shoved her feet into her boots, throwing on a heavy coat before stepping outside. The cold wrapped around her like a vice, but she barely felt it. Hey, she called softly, her voice barely carrying over the crisp morning air. Are you? A slow, shallow breath. Lena let out a breath of her own. Alive. But barely, She took a hesitant step forward. The bear did not react. His ears didn't flick, his eyes remained closed. She knelt a safe distance away, studying him. The hollows beneath his ribs were stark beneath his fur. He was starving. A bear this size should have been strong, imposing. Instead, he looked like a shadow of himself. Lena swallowed. He won't survive another night like this. The smart thing to do would be to leave him. Nature had its own way of dealing with the weak. But the smart thing didn't sit right with her. Before she could stop herself, she turned and hurried back inside. This time, she filled a bowl with fish, not cooked, but raw. She hesitated before grabbing an old blanket from a chest near the fireplace. Stupid. Reckless. You're going to regret this. And yet, she found herself outside again, stepping toward the bear. The scent of fish stirred something in him. A low, ragged breath shuddered through his body, and his nose twitched. Slowly, his eyes fluttered open, dark and unfocused. Lena placed the fish down in front of him and backed away. He watched her, warily, sluggishly, but made no move to attack. Instead, with a weak groan, he pulled himself forward and ate. And then, to her complete disbelief, he let out a low, rumbling sound. Not a growl. Something softer. Something grateful. Lena's chest tightened. Against every ounce of logic, every warning drilled into her since childhood, she stepped forward and did something she would have never imagined doing. She unfolded the old blanket and, with slow, careful hands, draped it over the bear's massive frame. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, with a heavy sigh, the bear lowered his head and closed his eyes. Lena took a shaky breath. What had she just done? To be continued. Lena had never thought she'd find herself watching over a bear. Yet, for 3 days, that was exactly what she did. The storm had passed, but the cold still clung to the forest, like a stubborn ghost. Each morning, she woke early, peering out the window with a strange mix of fear and anticipation. And each morning he was still there, curled in the same spot beneath her porch, the old blanket still draped over him like a second layer of fur. She didn't know why he stayed. Maybe he was too weak to leave. Maybe he had accepted her as something other than a threat. Either way, the routine remained the same. At sunrise, she placed food outside, raw fish, scraps of meat, whatever she could spare. At sunset, he ate in slow, careful movements, his eyes lifting toward the cabin just once before lowering again. He never approached. She never stepped too close. And yet, something had shifted. By the 4th day, the village noticed. Lena had only intended to make a quick trip, just long enough to gather supplies and return before the bear realized she was gone. But as she walked through the narrow streets, She felt the weight of curious eyes on her. A hand caught her arm. Lena. She turned to find Gregor Ivanov, the town's self-proclaimed survival expert, staring at her with narrowed eyes. He was a tall man, his face lined from years of braving the wild. "You've been quiet this week," he said, his voice low. "Everything all right?" Lena hesitated. Of course. Gregor's gaze flickered toward her sled, where she had stacked more fish than usual. Too much for just one person. "You've been feeding something," he said. It wasn't a question. Lena's heart pounded. Lying wasn't her strong suit. You know the rules." His voice hardened. "Bears don't belong near people. If one comes too close, we drive it out before it forgets to fear us." Lena forced a smile. "It's just a stray dog." Gregor didn't look convinced. But after a long pause, he let go of her arm. "Be careful," he muttered. "Some animals aren't meant to be saved." That night, the bear stood for the first time. Lena had just stepped onto the porch when she froze. The blanket had slipped from his back, pooling onto the snow. His great frame, though still thin, no longer sagged with exhaustion. Slowly, he rose onto all fours, his dark eyes locking onto hers. A thrill of fear jolted through her. He had never moved like this before. He had never stood this close before. She knew she should retreat. The rational part of her screamed to go inside, to shut the door and remember what he was, a wild animal, a predator. But then he did something unexpected. He lowered his head, not in aggression, not in dominance, but in something almost reverent. A slow breath escaped Lena's lips. The realization settled over her like the falling snow. He wasn't just taking her help. He was acknowledging it. A silent bond had formed between them, fragile yet unbreakable. Then, without a sound, the bear turned. Lena's chest tightened as she watched him step away from the cabin, his massive paws pressing into the untouched snow. He moved with slow, deliberate steps, his form blending into the shadows of the trees. And just like that, he was gone. Lena swallowed the strange ache in her throat. Somehow, she knew this wasn't goodbye. It was just the beginning. To be continued. The forest had returned to silence. For days, Lena found herself standing by the window, searching the tree line for any sign of movement. But the bear, Boric, as she had quietly started calling him, had vanished into the wild. She told herself this was a good thing. A bear had no place near humans. He had healed enough to move on, to return to the life he was meant to live. And yet, an unfamiliar ache settled in her chest each evening as she set down a bowl of food, only to wake and find it untouched. Winter faded into spring, the heavy snows melting into rushing streams. Birds returned, their songs weaving through the forest, and new life stirred beneath the thawing earth. But even as the world shifted, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in her, too. Then, one evening, the forest took something back. She had wandered too far. It started as a simple walk, a break from the cabin walls pressing in around her. The air smelled of damp pine and fresh earth, and for a while she let herself enjoy it. The quiet, the space, the sense of being alone, but not lonely. Then the fog rolled in, thick and sudden, swallowing the trees whole. Lena's pulse quickened. She knew these woods well, had traveled them since childhood, but now they were unrecognizable. Every tree looked the same, the once familiar paths obscured by shifting mist. She turned left, then right, then left again, only to realize she had no idea which way led home, A branch snapped in the distance. Lena stilled. Not the wind, not the creak of melting ice. Something was moving through the trees. She wasn't alone. Her heart pounded as she turned in slow circles, listening. Too heavy for a deer. Too deliberate for the wind. The hairs on the back of her neck rose. Then, a low huff, A massive shadow materialized through the mist. Lena stumbled back, her foot catching on a root. Panic shot through her as she scrambled for balance, her mind racing through possibilities. A wolf? A bear? Something worse? The shape stepped closer, its outline becoming clear. Her breath caught. Boric. For a long moment, neither of them moved. His dark eyes met hers, steady and knowing. There was no hesitation in his stance. Asterisk, asterisk, as if he had been searching for her. Asterisk, asterisk. Lena swallowed hard, her pulse still hammering in her ears. Boric, she whispered. He huffed again, then turned, his massive frame cutting through the fog. And then, asterisk, asterisk, he looked back. Asterisk, asterisk. A silent invitation. Lena hesitated only a moment before stepping forward. The journey back felt endless. The fog made the world disorienting, but Boric moved without hesitation. He walked ahead of her, his lumbering form steady, unshaken. Each time she slowed, he did too. Each time she hesitated, he waited. Lena didn't know how long they walked, but at last, through the haze, she saw it. Asterisk, asterisk, the golden glow of her cabin. Asterisk, asterisk. Relief flooded her, but when she turned to Boric, he had already begun to retreat into the trees. She opened her mouth, unsure of what she even wanted to say. Thank you? Please don't leave. Asterisk, asterisk. But she knew better. This was not a pet, not a companion she could ask to stay. And yet, asterisk, asterisk, he had saved her. Asterisk, asterisk. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. Boric gave one last lingering look before turning and disappearing into the mist. Lena stood there, breathless. She had helped him, and now he had returned the favor. But deep down, she knew this was more than just a simple exchange of kindness. This was a bond, one neither of them fully understood. And whatever it meant, this was far from the end. To be continued. Lena thought the bear was gone for good. After that night, when Boric had led her home through the mist, she had stood by the tree line for what felt like hours, hoping for one last glimpse. But he had vanished, swallowed by the wild. And yet, she could feel his presence. The first sign was the food. One morning, Lena stepped outside to find something unusual on her porch, a freshly caught fish, larger than anything she could have pulled from the river this time of year. It lay neatly beside the empty wooden bowl where she had once left food for Boric. A gift. Her breath hitched as she crouched down, fingers brushing over the cool, glistening scales. It was impossible. Bears don't bring people gifts. Yet she knew. Boric was still watching. Hashtag, 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 but the village was watching, too. At first, it was whispers. Quiet, cautious murmurs whenever she passed through the market. People noticed her trips into town had changed, less frequent, but when she did come, she bought too much fish, too much meat for someone who lived alone. Then came the questions. Gregor Ivanov, always too perceptive, caught her outside the butcher's stall one morning. Lena. His voice was low, edged with something between curiosity and concern. Tell me the truth. Are you feeding something out there? Lena forced a laugh. If I were, would it be any of your business? Gregor didn't smile. There are tracks near the village, he said, his expression darkening. Large ones. Too close for comfort. Lena's heart pounded. There are bears in the forest, Gregor. That's nothing new. His eyes narrowed. Maybe, but a bear that isn't afraid of humans. He took a step closer. That's a problem. Something cold slithered through her stomach. She knew what happened to problem bears. There were men in the village who took care of them. Asterisk, asterisk hunters with rifles. Men who saw them only as threats. Asterisk, asterisk. Boric was no threat. But the village would never see it that way. Lena swallowed hard, gripping the basket in her hands. I wouldn't worry, she said carefully. If a bear comes too close, it's because someone left food out. I don't make that mistake. Gregor studied her, as if trying to decide whether to believe her. After a long pause, he exhaled, shaking his head. Just be careful, Lena. She forced a smile. Always. But as she walked away, her mind raced. The village was watching. And if Boric came too close again, they would not hesitate. She had saved him once. Now, she might have to do it again. To be continued. The warning signs came faster than Lena had expected. First, it was the voices, low murmurs in the village. hushed conversations that stopped the moment she stepped too close. Then it was the tracks, deep impressions in the snow leading toward her cabin, prints that did not go unnoticed by keen-eyed hunters. And finally, it was the rifles. She saw them glinting in the afternoon light when she arrived in town. A group of men gathered outside Gregor's lodge, oiling their weapons, sharpening knives. Her stomach turned to ice. Hashtag, the hunt had begun. Lena moved fast. She barely spoke to the shopkeepers, barely acknowledged the curious glances as she loaded her sled with supplies. Then, heart pounding, she turned toward the woods, toward Boric. If she could find him before they did, drive him away, make him understand the danger, he might have a chance. But the moment she reached the cabin, she knew she was too late. The snow had been disturbed, deep tracks, fresh and heavy, leading toward the trees, Boric was here. And so were they. A gunshot cracked through the air. Lena's heart stopped. Then, a roar, not of pain, of warning. She ran. Her boots pounded against the frozen ground as she pushed forward, weaving between trees, following the echo of the shot. Branches scratched her skin, her breath came in ragged gasps, but she didn't stop. Not when another gunshot rang out, not when she heard the shouts of men. Then, a clearing, Boric stood at the center, his massive form tense, his fur bristling. Blood streaked his shoulder, a grazing wound, but a wound nonetheless. Facing him, rifles raised, were Gregor and the hunters. Lena didn't think, didn't hesitate. She threw herself between them. Stop. Her voice rang through the clearing, raw and desperate. Silence. The men froze. Gregor's eyes widened. Lena, what the hell are you doing? Boric let out a low, rumbling growl behind her. She didn't move. Her body trembled, but she lifted her chin. You can't kill him. Gregor scoffed. That bear is dangerous. No, he's not, she shot back. He's never hurt anyone. He's just surviving. The men exchanged uncertain glances. Gregor's grip on his rifle tightened. Lena, move. No. The word came out stronger than she expected. She turned slightly, just enough to glance at Boric. His dark eyes were locked on her, and for the first time, she saw something in them she hadn't noticed before. Trust. Then, slowly, deliberately, Boric took a step back. Then, another. The tension in his frame eased, his shoulders lowering. He let out a deep exhale, watching Lena for a long, lingering moment, then turned and disappeared into the trees. Gone. Lena's heart clenched, but she stayed where she was, her back still to the hunters. You saw it, she whispered. He didn't attack. He ran. Gregor exhaled sharply, lowering his rifle. The other men followed suit, though some still cast wary glances at the forest. Finally, Gregor sighed. That bear's not natural. Lena smiled faintly. No, he's not. A long pause. Then, Gregor shook his head. You always were stubborn. He turned. The others followed, one by one, until she was alone in the clearing. Lena let out a shaky breath. She didn't know when, or if, Boric would return. But one thing was certain. She had saved him. And somehow, she knew one day, he would return the favor again. Hashtag, the end, or perhaps just the beginning.